Our program today, as I said, in recognition of International Women's Day, is being moderated by Anna Prisacari, our own Dr. Anna Prisacari. She is working in user experience as a user experience researcher at Amazon. There she works on a team that builds HR data-driven tools for Amazon leaders and their associates. Anna received her master's and a PhD degree in human-computer interaction at Iowa State University and a bachelor's in international business and marketing and MBA from St. Ambrose University. Anna moved to Minneapolis 5 years ago and joined the greatest Rotary Club in the world almost 4 years ago. She was born in Moldova and has family members in Moldova and Ukraine. Anna loves music and theater and can't wait to see our performance of Ruthergore this Saturday. I'll put one more plug in there. All right, Anna, thank you for being our moderator this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Awesome. It's been a while since I've seen this room with so many people in, so thank you for coming. And thank you for so many guests attending in person and online. Before we begin, first of all, happy International Women's Day to all women here in the room and online. And a special thank you to all men who support us every day at work, home, and in our community. So thank you to everyone. Well, International Women's Day is a wonderful holiday. Actually, it's an official holiday back home for me in Moldova. When I came to the United States a little over 20 years ago, I noticed this day was celebrated a bit differently. Here in the US, it is not just a day, but a full month when we honor and celebrate women with accomplishments and roles they played throughout American history. And each year there's a theme that goes with International Women's Day. Last year, if you go to the next slide, it was Choose to Challenge. People around the world were posting picture on social media indicating they were in support of this movement. And this year's theme was Break the Bias. So maybe some of you have seen people posting those pictures. I know I did. One of our speakers did. People that post together who they work with in the workplace, groups, families, at home, on streets. And this is the theme for this year, Break the Bias. I was participating in one of the workshops yesterday at Amazon when we discussed breaking the bias, external bias, but also internal biases that women face on a daily basis. Very different. Now, if we look at Moldova, it is a different celebration. This is kind of Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, all celebration just for women at work day, all on March 8th. Men give flowers to women. We actually sell the most flowers on this day. And in Moldova, we also give a little pin with marțișor, red and white colors that symbolizes the beginning of spring. And I remember when I was in 7th grade, the boys in our classroom collected money, went and bought a small bouquet of snowdrop flowers and gave to every girl in the classroom. So just as an example, a slightly different perspective how people around the world celebrate this holiday. And today I would like to celebrate both all women and also discuss some important topics that women have faced or still facing. And for that, I've invited 3 very special, brilliant, smart, very ambitious women whom I've personally met when I was a graduate student at Iowa State University. And this is Zina. So I'm gonna read a very special introduction, whom I've met actually in one of my graduate classes. Dr. Ella Swat is an assistant professor of interior design at Texas State University. She was born in Iraq. She grew up mainly in Jordan and lived in several other countries within Middle East. In 2011, she moved to the US to pursue graduate studies at Iowa State University. After earning master's in fine arts and interior design, graduate certificate in instructional design, and PhD in curriculum and instructional technology from Iowa State, she began her teaching career at the University of Southern Mississippi. Today, she's the professor at Texas State, where she conducts research on game-based learning, virtual and augmented reality as instructional and learning tools for design students. So thanks, Zena. I know it's very early for you. All right, next one, Sonali. I met Sonali when we both were running for office for graduate and professional student senate. We both won. So we got to work together for a year, and I remember her as a very passionate leader. Okay, Dr. Sonali Didi is an associate professor in the Department of Design and Merchandising and core faculty in the School of Global Environmental Sustainability at Colorado State University. Her research focuses on sustainable clothing production and consumption. She was an expert consultant for BBC Radio in UK, New York Academy of Sciences, and invited international speaker for numerous events to share her research. Outside work, Sonali enjoys cooking and sharing it with family and friends. Hi, Sonali. And the last one, Svetlana. We met at Ames, but off campus. We both joined and were members of a group called Friends of International Women, where women of different countries would get together every 2 weeks to share their culture with each other. And there's a picture of me with Svetlana on the left side, where we were sharing Ukrainian culture with our members. We did not plan, we dressed up in very ethnic outfits. And we actually got to tell a little bit more about our culture, because Svetlana's outfit indicates she was a married woman, and my outfit indicated I was not married because I had flowers and ribbons. So with that, Dr. Svetlana Zbarska is the undergraduate research program coordinator at Iowa State. In this role, she coordinates campus-wide undergraduate research programs and initiatives such as first-year honors mentor program and research in the Capitol. Dr. Zbarska received her PhD in neuroscience from Iowa State University. She's originally from Ukraine, where she received her bachelor's in science and physics and master's in biophysics from the Shevchenko National University in Kiev. She's married and has 2 daughters, 17 and 11 years old. Her husband is a faculty member at the University of Kentucky Department of Mechanical Engineering. And her older daughter is a national junior Olympic level 10 gymnast. So welcome to all panelists. I know I have lots of questions, and I guess you might have lots of questions too. So I will start only with 1 or 2 questions first, and then I will open for Q&A, because I'm assuming we will have more conversation based on your questions than just me asking questions. But before we get to questions, first, I wanted to kind of give a side note that Svetlana's husband, parents are today in Kiev, where we know terrible war is taking place. And actually, Bill noticed that I was wearing Ukrainian colors today. So before we begin, really quickly, Svetlana, could you give us an update? How's your family doing in Kiev today?
Hi, everyone. So thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to join this meeting, to speak to all of you. And my heart was melting when I was listening the first part of the meeting, where you talk so much about Ukraine and how much support you are providing. Thank you, everyone. So I believe if everyone in the world will be alert about what's going on in Ukraine right now and do whatever they can from their position whenever they are, it could be just repost on their Facebook or other medias, or it could be like sharing with people who doesn't know, or just simply, I will show I'm wearing this little flag, just making this ribbon flag and wearing that. I just came back yesterday from the conference and I was wearing that, and believe me, several people came and nicely asked me, what does it mean? So any alerts, any talks, any bringing attention to Ukraine, creating pressure to legislators will help at this moment. So about my family, my in-laws decided to stay in Kiev, and despite the fact, we were trying to convince them to move to Poland and then hopefully to move to United States. As my husband's parents, they refused. They have health issue. They're about 70 years old, and they don't know English. Obviously, they've been in the United States multiple times. It's still very difficult for them to do that trip and move to Poland, you probably saw horrible pictures, what's going on in the train, on the railroad stations. At the same time, I have to thank Poland and Polish people because they are providing unbelievable support for people who are moving. So my mother-in-law actually texted me while I already was in the meeting, and she's saying that sirens are going nonstop. So if before it was like siren probably once an hour, like right now it's just nonstop. She is living in the one of the sleeping kind of neighborhood, where it's like multi-story apartmental complexes. Their apartment is on the 8th floor. Right now, they still have internet, they have water, and they have electricity. But I know other houses in Ames or apartmental complexes, they don't have either anything or one of those utilities. My brother, he is living in Kiev suburb, which has big railroad station, like transportational railroad station from Kiev, and he's electrical engineer on that railroad station. He worked 8-hour shifts. Right now he's working 24-hour shifts because it's very difficult for people to get to the workplaces, people who switch him. And while working, in addition to their general responsibilities, what they're doing, they are cutting old rails and they are soldering them, and they call it like metal hedgehogs to stop tanks. So they are making those, they're putting them on the roads in anticipation of tanks. So that suburb is located literally 20 miles from 2 other suburbs, which is completely destroyed. It's Vasilkiv. I don't know if, 2 days, and the second day of the war, Vasilkiv had a military base, like small, I couldn't say like it had little military airport. It was totally bombed. And another, it's Makariv, which is also like less than 20 miles from my brother's home. And my friends, I grew up in that suburb as well, so it's called Fastiv. And my classmates saying when Vasilkiv was exploding, we had feeling that it was just like 2 miles from us, how strong the explosions were. They saw the fire. And as I said, that's about 20, well, maybe less than 20 miles, 20 kilometers. So my sister-in-law, so she lived in Kiev, and literally over the first half an hour when 2 big airports in Kiev were exploded, bombed, actually. So, and she was living just 2 kilometers, like a mile, a little bit more than a mile from that airport. She woke up kids at 6 a.m., put them in their pajamas, to the car and escaped the Kiev toward the other like south location. Right now, she's in the countryside with 2 little kids. The problem is that right now she has food, but, because it's only 10 days and in countryside, you have some, food pantries, but it will run out pretty fast. So, and gas stations, they don't have gasoline. So people, even if you have car, you cannot really move. The only way for Ukrainians now to escape Kiev, and I don't know if it's valid right now today because I didn't have chance to check all news, but as yesterday, the only way to escape Kiev, it was by train to Lviv. So usually that train takes about 7-8 hours. Right now, it's up to 24 hours because train stopped if they, were noticed that there is bombing or something. So yeah, I really, really appreciate Polish people here in Ames who reached to me 3rd day of the war, and they offer that their parents in Poland can host several Ukrainian families. So in such a way, because of those Polish friends, I helped, I couldn't say I helped, they escaped, to that Polish family. And Two of my childhood friends now safely with 4 kids in Poland. Another, my university friend, is in northern part of the Poland. So people, women, not people, women with little kids and elderlies as 65 plus only allowed to leave the country. So guys from 18 to 60 are not allowed to leave. And you can imagine the psychological pressure which is bringing to the family, like to be separated from their husbands who are not at the war yet, but most likely will be, and they don't know if they will ever see them again. So this is unbelievable. When I started to talk to those families, from my hometown who are now in Poland, it took about 4 or 5 days, like continuous, convincing how that they have to protect their children right now and view the situation in the best light possible for them to make that decision and move out of Ukraine. So the pressure is enormous. What's going on? It's unbelievable. Still, I'm talking about that and I feel like my body is shivering because that's a lot of suffering for Ukrainian people.
We're very sorry to hear this is happening to your family and to many families in Ukraine today, Svetlana, but thank you for sharing the updates. I hope a lot of you are curious to know more and we'll happy to talk more about it. And actually, it's a good segue into my next question for all the panelists. When there's a major political economic event that happens back home for us, it impacts us here in the US. Speaking of present or past events that happened in your home country, how did they affect you directly or indirectly when you're here in the US with your family? Zina, we'll start with you.
First, good morning to all of you. I'm very honored to be part of this panel. I'm trying to not be a Debbie Downer, but it's a hard situation that Ukraine is going through, and being a child of war, I was 5. I was actually born the last year of the Iraqi war. I don't remember that part, but I do remember the second Gulf War between Kuwait and Iraq, and I was 5. And I do remember the sirens. I remember the shaking when the bombings used to happen. I remember running to the bathroom and hiding. There are no words really to explain what you feel unless you've been through it. Growing up, moving away from that situation, it doesn't get easier because it's kind of, it's a trauma, right? So anything that happens that is relevant to something that you've experienced, whether it's your own country, whether it's a neighboring country, whether even it's people that were living safely like Ukraine, they had nothing to do with all of this. It just brings back those emotions and those hard to put into words, right? Aside from the heartache and the helplessness that you feel, being thousands of miles away, the best that you can do is send money. In situations like Ukraine or Lebanon or like Palestine or Iraq, when the bombings are happening, when the actual invasion is happening, cash flow stops. Even if you send the money, they can't take the money. So it's not just about the supplies are not there. They can't even get the money into their pockets to actually do something with it or actually to leave the country. So it's the sage is not just physical, it's also economical. You can't have cash flow. Banks will not let go of the money to people because they don't have enough cash. So the few things that you can do is like post about it in media, and then you feel a bit worthless by the end of it, that you can't be there to help because what is one person going to do, right? But at the same time, you can't send anything to help. It's you feel very restrained. Sorry, I'm getting too emotional about this, but I had some notes that I wanted to share. about this, things that do happen as a reflection here sometimes vary. So sometimes people are very supportive. I think during the past 3 years or 4 years, social media has really helped people understand the other perspective, what's really going on in the streets in other countries. If I think back to when I first moved to the US in 2011 and 2012, especially in smaller towns like Ames or smaller towns that don't have that much media coverage aside from like Fox News or CNBC, right? There is some stigma. There is some, being treated like a second-class citizen or second-class community member. I'm a Muslim. I used to wear a headscarf when I first moved to Iowa, and during that time, there were political issues happening in different areas in the Middle East. My husband is Palestinian. I'm from Iraq. We both lived in Jordan, but we still have roots and family in all these countries. I did get chased down the streets in Ames. I did get called names. 3 years in, I was like, okay, I can't deal with this anymore. So I decided to take it off. It was a very difficult decision because it wasn't coming from a personal belief or a personal decision. It came because other people were doing things that were impacting my livelihood, that were impacting the way I dress or the way I look. So sometimes, you get that good support. Sometimes people are very helpful and very supportive, and other times it's completely the other side of the coin. So those are kind of like my 2 cents.
Thank you, Zena. And just to add, when we send cash, we just talked a few days ago with our relatives in a different town in Ukraine. They said the prices jumped 3 times. So even if there is still food available for purchase, the prices are so high that they would need even more money today. Sonali, do you have anything to add to this or share a personal story on this topic?
Thank you for having me on this panel, and Svetlana and Zena. I'm sorry, and I hope the situation gets better, and all prayers to everyone who is fighting. And I guess it's my experiences related to, a bigger situation, a war kind of, or anything happening in India affecting us. I think the biggest one, which it's a flip side. It's not that something happening in our country, but something happening here. And I don't know if this is relevant, but during the last administration, we could just see a switch flipped in a day. You're treated completely differently when the administration changed in 2015, 2016. And every store you go, the people looking at you as if you are an outsider and treating you very differently than even just a day before was very hurtful, I would say. The second instance I would say would be during when the Delta variant came up in India, and people just looking at you as if you brought the Delta variant to US. And I'm like, it has nothing to do with where I am from. It is just how it is. You don't have to label people and look at them differently, behave with them differently with those. So I think those are the 2 things which really have affected me. I mean, you can see that difference in customer service at a grocery store where they're greeted so well, and then you go and then there's just this plain face, and I'm like, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? And then you realize that it's the color of your skin that affects how they perceive and behave with us.
Thank you, Sonali. Svetlana, do you have anything to add, whether on current events, or how are they impacting your family here in the US?
Well, I will talk about what's going on right now, because again, I want to ask everyone, do whatever is possible from your position, to support Ukraine. And it costs nothing to post Ukrainian flag on social media, right? So it costs nothing to repost Close the Skies on top of Ukraine. You know, that's what Ukrainian presidents and government is asking from NATO right now. Close our sky, protect our sky, because that's the main way how Russians are like bombing and destroying Ukrainian cities. So Ukrainian army will deal with Russians on the ground. So, and with all those thousands of tanks, which are now in the territory of Ukraine. So since literally first hour of the war, I realized how much I am Ukrainian. You know, while living regular life in US, you know, you're so much in your work. I have been living in US for 20 years. I received my PhD here. My kids were born here. So, and you just became, you know, person of the world, you know, so you in the regular daily life, you don't feel like, okay, I'm Ukrainian. You know, yes, you can speak two languages, but you can speak within your family, right? But since beginning of this war, I just felt how much I am Ukrainian, you know, and I was offered to run the half an hour time on the radio on the weekly basis. We already organized 2 marches, one, or I was involved in 2. There were actually 3 big in Iowa. So one was in Ames, just 2 days after war started. And then one was on campus last Wednesday, where president of Iowa State University came, provost, you know, the top administration and quite a bit of students. All newspaper were writing. So basically my life changed right now because I put so much to bring people's attention, alert, you know, donations, support, you know, Ukraine. I know some businesses in US, actually 2 businesses already called me and they said that they will dedicate some of the days, like 2 restaurants. They said this is all profit from those days they will send to Ukraine. They're asking, give me an account, you know, and if you're asking the same question, how can I help? Please visit my Facebook page. I am reposting how people can help. So there is like account from the Ukrainian bank, which is in collaboration with New York Bank, Morgan's New York Bank, and they're transferring money to Ukraine. I know some businesses in big cities, they basically stop their business and they're collecting donations toward Ukraine and they're sending donations. My brother, I talked to him yesterday. So he had day off between those 24-hour shift. So him and his neighbor went and unloaded the big truck, which came from Rome, with diapers, with food. You know, people still have little kids. And as Anna said, prices went unbelievably high and you cannot do anything about that. You know, so you cannot tell those stores keep prices low if even gasoline, you know, went up so much. And so, and my brother was impressed that trucks are already in Ukraine with help, you know, and he said, yeah, I see that donation was done. So looks like people in Rome collected money and bought that stuff, you know, from the store because of everything was packaged. And it's, you know, yes, it's physical help, but it's also emotional support. My brother came very inspired. He doesn't feel like he's alone, that actually Europe was them, you know, and it's very inspiring for Ukrainian people to have that help.
Thank you. I know we're running very short on time, so I only covered one of a few questions I was planning to ask, but I would like to open now to the room or online if anyone has additional questions for the panel. Do we have questions online? No questions online for anyone in the room? Oh, one hand.
I was just going to say thank you all for being so brave and sharing the story, and thank you for telling us how we can help. I just pray for you and your families.
This is Mary Pat Cumming. Thank you again to all of you for joining the panel this morning. As an educator, I have a question about your experiences, both from coming into the educational system in the United States what either difficulties or joys you found within that as you went through all of your both undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral programs.
Sonali, can we start with you this time?
Sure. I think being in the higher education system here in the US for the past 7, 10, 11 years now as a student and as a professor, I think it's mostly been a very positive experience with some microaggressions, I would say, but I would say mostly it has been a very positive experience. I don't think I've ever been in the higher education context. I would say, yes, there is a lot of work to be done. There is a lot of push in the past 2 years for diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice topics, and I'm very active in those. But I think for most part, it's that the people are not aware of the issues, or they just don't connect with it. So we have to find new ways of telling our stories or making them understand, because they come with a perspective of, I am a good person, I see good in everyone. Why is there so much of conversation about white fragility or white supremacy? So it's they put themselves in the picture, and that's when it becomes hard. And we are talking at a societal level. So those are some of the challenges which I think I face in a higher education context, about people making it personal versus thinking it as a societal problem.
Zina, do you have a story to share? I know you've shared a story with me that was very emotional, so I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing what you told me a few months ago, or pick a different one.
Yeah, I'll keep it light. I think I've talked about enough negative things for today. My experience as a student, I didn't do my undergraduate here, my master's and PhD. So my graduate journey was honestly very supportive. The microaggressions that I talked about, the things that happened in Ames, were not at Iowa State campus at all. They were within the city, within the streets, within small shops, that, people, as Sonali said, they're not aware that other things happen outside the small town, right? I still have, I would say 85% of my students in all of the small towns that I've taught in have never left the state, have never moved or visited another state, which puts things in context. People are not ignorant on purpose. They're just not exposed to the things that you have been exposed to as an international person. So back to, an expression that Svetlana said, you become a person of the world because you packed your life in 2 bags of 50 pounds each and moved across the world and started anew. Not everybody gets that opportunity. Not everybody gets that chance to really broaden their horizon and open really their eyes to see how other people are living, how other people are working, what are their values, what are their ethics. They have very different values between different sides of the world. So I think the way I see it, I think it's my responsibility as an educator to help the community and the society that I'm in to be exposed, right? To open conversations, to show them part of my world. I think that's one of the main ways that I can help expose those students who have been in very sheltered environments. Show them that there's so much out there that you can explore, that you can be part of. And it doesn't necessarily have to end with a degree, it doesn't have to end with a title. The way that you engage and collaborate with people from all over the world and not just in your small town.
Thank you. I know we have like 30 seconds left. Svetlana, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I just have to add that many people are not aware how unprotected graduate students are in general on campus, and especially international students. I personally, I guess I'm lucky. I had a very supportive faculty mentor, but I don't think my husband could say the same. So so in general, graduate students, international graduate students, when they are issued a student visa, they totally depends on their faculty mentor and the stipend. And if those relations will not work, they basically, it's extremely difficult to change the mentor. It's extremely difficult to move to another university, from the paperwork perspective. And that puts total dependence, the graduate student, from a faculty mentor. So I don't know, Zina, and Sonali, if you would agree with me with that. So for example, official grad student does not have vacation. They don't have sick leaves. If you have kids who are getting sick, that's your problem. If you need to go and deliver your baby, that's in your free time, So you have to go and figure out. And if your faculty mentor said, like, in 3 days, you have to come back because of their, investments in research, you have to think about that, And if you say, sorry, I want to stop, you can't, because your paperwork, then you move to the section of to be legal, in 30 days, your status will expire and you become illegal. Do you see how much dependence graduate students, international grad students have from their faculty mentors? And those issues are not really addressed on campuses. It's kind of going, but everyone is talking about that, but there is no clear steps what administration is taking on each campus to develop standard procedure for these situations.
Very sad, but very dependent on your advisor. If you have a good advisor, you're very lucky as a graduate student. That is very true. We're out of time. I don't know, going over time. I guess, speakers, would you be available to stay online for extra 5-10 minutes? I want to make sure they would be available too.
Yes.
Would that be okay if we continue? So I guess if you have to leave, it's okay. We understand we typically finish exactly at 8:30, but for those who are interested to listen more, we'll continue for 5-10 more minutes. Okay, thank you. Jim, do you have a question or? Oh, where are we going to go? So Jim is asking, I'll just repeat for everyone who is online. The question was about the Soviet Union collapse that touched me, Svetlana, mom. We all have our stories. So now when it's very similar situation politically, economically, what are our stories? I was a child when this happened, but one thing that I can say for someone of my age who remembers a little bit about it, I have a very different relationship with money than my friends who were born in the US. Here I see my friends very easily investing money, and it's something very hard for me to even think about it because I was growing up when there was no money. So it's really hard for me to put my money somewhere where I cannot immediately access or even might lose, like stocks. So this is something that I've developed this different relationship with financing that I need to get over. It is difficult for everyone, especially for people in Ukraine. We have families there. So that's what we do every day. We talk to as many people as we can to just make sure they are alive and the communication still happens. Because if there is no communication, there's no way for us to know where they are, how they're doing. And even with money, like Svetlana was saying, just by giving money, it's still not enough. So we're trying to figure it out what else there is possible for them. We watch the news and we watch news from different countries. There's a lot of social media. We notice there are differences in how news are being reported, but the ones that we trust are what we hear from people who are there today, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're experiencing. Svetlana, question?
You touched on what I was going to ask about is how would you guide us if we're interested in trying to be current on this and what events are happening? Would you say the major networks in the US are reliable sources, or should we be looking elsewhere for, better information? It seems like there's a lot of I think lighthearted propaganda is the way it feels like when I'm listening to NPR and trying to figure out where to get better information.
That's difficult to answer because for me, I talk directly to people who live there. That's definitely an advantage that my family has in the current situation. I always question what I see on TV when I turn TV on here, because I don't know if what they are showing, this is the conversation we just had yesterday. What is the process of confirming that what clips they're showing here on American TV have been proved that it's not a false video? It's geolocation, whether it was not multiple videos combined into one. So there's a lot of questions that I have. So typically I more question than I just take in as it is. And also just talking to family and friends who live there today. And even depending where your family is in Ukraine, they will tell you different things because different things happen in different parts of Ukraine too. So there is no an easy answer for that. So I would say probably
I have some suggestions on that topic. A lot of the news outlets, like the big networks on that side of the world or outside the US, have English versions. So I'll give an example, like Al Jazeera, there's Al Jazeera English. BBC, there's BBC Arabic, English, French. So if you seek news outlets or news networks that are not US based, right? So the headquarters is not in the US or the main office is not in the US, you'll probably get more, or you'll get less nuanced news and more truth. So I'm definitely sure that there are news outlets in Ukraine that do translate their content or provide English speaking reporters. So seeking local news outlets in those countries that you are interested in knowing more about would give you a more truthful look, less nuanced perspective.
Svetlana, would you?
Yes, if I could add, you know, I think in general, US is doing excellent job of highlighting the situation in Ukraine. And again, of course, my main source are Ukrainian news, but whatever I saw on US news, I did not find anything wrong or maybe overrepresented. I know before the war started, many people were asking me, like, is this true or is US exaggerating, you know, the situation that Russians are planning to invade Ukraine? And I said, look, despite the fact how much I wanted to stop, you know, to prevent the war and, you know, that this would never happen, there were some facts which were saying that despite of this craziness, you know, the war will start. You know, and US news, I think, did very good job of showing that. So I actually, in this case, I appreciate the US government openness. You know, they were first who said, like, Putin has a certain plan. You know, they knew dates, they knew the numbers of military parts in Belarus staying at the Ukrainian border. So I would say, yes, watch news. I don't see much propaganda. What kind of propaganda can be if one country occupied another one, you know? Despite these open news, I will share you a particular situation what my husband is facing at University of Kentucky. When not everyone, of course, but couple faculty, they were saying, well, Russian army is not actually affecting Ukrainian civil people. They're just bombing military bases. Which news are you watching? Are you watching Russian news really? You know, so that was like US citizen American, you know, who that was very, very difficult to even accept, you know. So if someone is thinking it's okay to bomb another country military territories. So I think US is doing great job of showing what's going on in Poland, what's going on in Europe, you know, with Ukrainian refugees. Yeah. But I agree with Zina. Try, if you want to get news from Ukraine, you know, you can find, I am reposting. If I see some short news, I am trying to share again on my Facebook page. I posted our President Zelensky speech to Russian people. He did the speech particularly to Russian people, and there is English subtitles to that.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
And I'll have you stay up here. On behalf of the panelists today, I would love if you could sign the book that we will give to a third grader through Way to Grow. And perhaps you can sign on behalf of the panelists as well. And of course, the bookmark for you as well, because I know you're an avid reader. So there you go. Thank you again so much for putting to this wonderful panel together for International Women's Day. What a great program. We really do appreciate it. Thank you. Next week, we have another great speaker. Rebecca Moncrief is going to speak to us. Don't let joint pain wilt your garden. I look forward to that. I want to thank Doug Schmidt for that great song today. Brock and Ross, of course, thank you for all you're doing with being Zoom masters. Mary Pat, thank you for being our club administrator. Everybody have a great Rotary week.